Imagine rising at dawn on a cool Saturday morning, eager for some quiet time on your own land, only to discover a massive SUV sprawled across your driveway like an immovable rock. Not merely parked, but positioned on purpose, sealing off every possible inch so no vehicle, car, truck, or tractor could squeeze by. That was the sight that greeted me as I stepped onto the porch, coffee mug warming my fingers. And right away, I understood this was no mistake. It was an act of defiance. The SUV didn't belong to any guest, confused motorist, or random passerby. No, it was Karen's, the self-crowned ruler of our HOA, who paraded through the streets as though every inch of asphalt belonged to her personally. For months, she had hounded me over one thing after another. My tractor ruining the view, my grass failing her beauty standards, even the shade of paint on my mailbox. But this crossed an entirely new line of nerve. She had simply claimed my driveway as her private spot for the day. At first, I tried talking myself down, wondering if perhaps she had misjudged or faced some urgent situation. Yet when I approached and spotted the handwritten note tucked beneath her wiper blade, fury surged through me. It said, "You hardly use this driveway anyway, so I'm using it today. Get over it." The sheer nerve rendered me silent for a second. Who treats someone's private property like that? I scanned the street. Several neighbors had already seen it. A couple shook their heads and murmured quietly. Others grinned, clearly amused, waiting to watch how the scene would unfold. Because one truth stood out plainly: Karen was craving a confrontation. She wanted me pounding on her door, pleading for her to shift the vehicle, handing her another opportunity to stand tall and lecture me about who really controlled this neighborhood. But rather than explode in anger, an unexpected stillness washed over me. I took another sip of coffee, watched the warm vapor curl into the chilly air, and remembered something important. I didn't just own a driveway. I owned a tractor, a large, robust piece of equipment built to shift soil, uproot trees, and, yes, relocate vehicles that had no business sitting where they were. The choice crystallized in my head. If Karen chose to obstruct me, then I would demonstrate exactly what happens when someone underestimates a landowner armed with patience, property, and serious horsepower. With that settled, I placed my coffee cup on the railing, climbed up into the tractor seat, and started rolling toward her gleaming SUV. The instant the engine roared to life, the whole neighborhood seemed to perk up. Its low, powerful rumble rolled down the cul-de-sac, reverberating off the neatly trimmed lawns and spotless, HOA-compliant homes. Curtains fluttered, blinds parted, and suddenly eyes were everywhere. Karen's SUV rested there like an arrogant sentinel, shining brightly in the sunlight as though challenging me to make a move. I didn't pause. My fingers tightened on the wheel, and I eased the throttle ahead. The tractor surged forward, its heavy treads grinding gravel with each deliberate rotation. Every careful foot closer to her vehicle felt inevitable. Now, a few neighbors ventured onto their porches, phones already raised, murmuring among themselves, "He's not actually going through with it, right?" Oh, but I was. Then Karen herself burst out of her front door, still in her robe, arms flailing as if directing rush hour traffic. "Stop right there," she screamed. "That's a high-end vehicle. You can't lay a finger on it." Her voice broke, echoing sharply along the block like a siren of rage. I leaned just enough out of the cab, and answered, calm and even. "You blocked my driveway, Karen. I'm simply clearing your SUV out of my way." Her expression contorted with pure indignation. "You wouldn't dare," but the reality was, I already had. The tractor's forks slipped smoothly beneath the SUV's chassis with unexpected grace. Metal creaked as the powerful lift raised the front end, leaving the tires hanging a few inches above the asphalt. Sharp intakes of breath rippled through the watching crowd. Cameras kept rolling, and Karen looked ready to collapse where she stood. For a brief second, I held still, partly for the theater of it, partly to relish the moment of fairness. Her SUV swayed gently in the tractor's hold, completely at its mercy. I offered her one final opportunity. "Move it yourself, Karen." Final warning. But rather than back down, she dug in deeper. "If you drop my car, I'll make sure you're arrested. You'll never beat me. I run this HOA." Those words were all the confirmation I needed. With a slow, controlled motion, I guided the tractor ahead and angled the SUV toward the drainage ditch bordering my land. The gathered neighbors exploded into a mix of laughter, shocked gasps, and scattered cheers as the vehicle slid forward nose first into the ditch with a deep, gratifying crunch. Mud flew upward, tires sank deep, and the once mighty SUV now appeared pathetic, tilted, trapped, and thoroughly humbled. Karen's shriek could have cracked windows. She stomped furiously, howling, "You'll pay for this. You'll regret ever messing with me." But I simply shut off the tractor engine, stepped down from the cab, and strolled back to retrieve my coffee. Karen didn't merely pitch a fit. She erupted into an absolute spectacle. She planted herself at the ditch's edge, arms thrashing wildly, hair whipping in the wind, shrieking as though the apocalypse had arrived. Her SUV rested crooked in the muck, headlights partially swallowed by mud, tires whirring futilely while she floored the accelerator in panic. Yet the more she revved, the farther it sank into the soft earth. The neighbors were absolutely loving the show. A few burst into outright laughter, others clustered in small groups, murmuring excitedly, phones aloft to record every ridiculous moment. From across the road, one man called out, "Guess you'll be needing a tow now, Karen," another added, "or perhaps a stronger tractor next time." The mockery hung heavy in the air, and for the first time in ages, it wasn't aimed at me. Karen whirled around, cheeks blazing, jabbing a finger in my direction like the antagonist in a low-budget soap opera. "This is all you're doing. You destroyed my property. I'm phoning the HOA, the police, the mayor, every single authority." I didn't budge. I stood there, arms folded, perfectly composed. "You parked on my private driveway." I simply cleared the obstruction. Nothing complicated about it. That's when the reinforcements showed up. Less than 20 minutes later, 3 HOA board members arrived, dressed in their crisp, matching polo shirts. They clutched clipboards as though preparing for a formal audit. They huddled around Karen, nodding gravely while she howled about how I had assaulted her luxury vehicle with agricultural machinery. The board president, a pompous fellow named Greg, marched straight over to me. "This sort of conduct is completely unacceptable in our neighborhood," he declared, swelling with self-importance. "You cannot resort to heavy equipment to settle personal conflicts." I lifted one eyebrow. "So it's perfectly fine for someone to block a resident's driveway?" "Because that's precisely what your star member did here," Greg faltered, shifting his weight awkwardly. The surrounding neighbors murmured their agreement. Karen sensed the momentum shifting and wailed even more dramatically, "He's a menace. He threatened my safety. He ruined my car." Behind her, the SUV creaked faintly in the ditch, a thin wisp of exhaust drifting upward. It looked inconvenienced, certainly not demolished. Facts never mattered much to Karen. She fed on drama and the spotlight. When the first police car finally pulled in, lights pulsing blue and red, the tension thickened noticeably. Neighbors fell quiet, though phones remained raised and recording. As the officers climbed out, Karen rushed toward them theatrically, tears streaming, clutching her robe like a grieving widow in a courtroom scene. "Arrest him. He attempted to murder me." The lead officer frowned, scanning from her tear-streaked face to the idle tractor near my barn, then settling his gaze on me. "Sir, would you mind explaining the situation?" I nodded politely. "Happy to, officer. Allow me to walk you through everything." The officer stood ready, pen hovering above his notepad. The entire street had gone still now, every eye and every camera locked on me. Karen sniffled theatrically, gripping her robe tighter like a wronged heroine. But I held the facts, and I delivered them steadily. Karen parked on my private driveway without permission. She left a note openly admitting it was intentional. I used my tractor to relocate her vehicle carefully into the nearby ditch for convenience. No damage was done to the car, no contact with her, no shouting. I simply resolved an issue she caused. The officer jotted notes, then asked, "Do you still have that note?" Smiling faintly, I reached into my pocket and passed it over. Karen's unmistakable handwriting stared up at everyone. "You don't use this driveway enough, so I'm borrowing it today. Deal with it." The officer's eyebrows climbed. Laughter rippled through the neighbors. Karen lunged desperately, trying to grab the paper, screeching, "That's not mine." He faked it. But the damage was done. The evidence shouted far louder than her hysterics. Greg attempted one last rescue. "Officer, even assuming that's accurate, surely operating a tractor was over the top. We can resolve this through HOA channels." The officer shook his head firmly. "Sir, this occurred on private property. She trespassed and obstructed his access. Honestly, he exercised considerable restraint. Plenty of people would have phoned for a tow truck. But this," he nodded toward the ditch where the SUV sat. "Tires thick with mud, this was inventive. Not illegal." The crowd exploded into fresh laughter even louder than before. Even the officer allowed a brief grin before straightening his face. Karen's complexion flushed deep scarlet, her voice climbing to a piercing whine. "You're all against me. This entire neighborhood is ungrateful. I am the HOA." That was the final straw. One neighbor shouted back, "Not anymore." "You're not." Another called out, "Yeah, time to step down, Karen." The chorus grew, the balance tipping decisively. Her dominance, her arrogance, her imagined reign, it all collapsed publicly on the pavement in front of the very residents she had bullied for so long. The officer returned the note to me, gave a respectful nod, and said, "You're clear to continue your day, sir." Then he addressed Karen, who was still ranting senselessly. "Ma'am, I recommend arranging a tow truck and composing yourself before this escalates further." And just like that, the confrontation ended. Karen's SUV remained mired in the ditch until dusk, when a tow truck finally dragged it free like a fallen giant. But the true win lasted for longer. From that moment forward, Karen never again dared block my driveway. So, what do you think, folks? Did I handle it appropriately? Or did I go overboard? Share your opinions in the comments below. And if this wild HOA Karen tale made you smile, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you catch every upcoming crazy story.